eChurch Live. This is Monday, of course, because that's when we do eChurch Live. We do it on Monday, and I don't know what the date is.
October 12th.
October 12th, the day when Columbus was like one of the, about the 12th man to ever discover America. But anyway,
October 12th really is 7 days away from our anniversary.
And our anniversary, 1 week from tonight. You want to watch this tonight and take it all in for what you can, because next week we will not be doing eChurch. We will be at sea.
At sea?
We will be at sea.
Not A and not B. We'll be at sea.
We'll be at sea. We'll be at sea.
Okay, we're recording now.
Okay, we're recording and we're getting ready. So we will be at sea on our, it's our honeymoon, our anniversary. 2-year anniversary, and we're celebrating 2 wonderful years, and we're going to be a sea. Is that right?
At sea.
At sea. Is it a sea a word? A-S-E-A. Somebody let us know. Somebody get in the chat room and tell us if a sea, A-S-E-A, is a word. Do you say that we will be a sea, or we will be at sea? I want to know before the night's over. And now let's get into the word tonight. I've got a good one for you. We're going to have a good discussion, and I pray that we can make it clear enough so that people really get something good from this. It's not very deep. We're going to look at basic gospel here, but we're going to really
challenge the paradigms.
Yeah, it definitely is going to challenge the paradigm. Okay, I'm going to read out of Proverbs 16 just to get us started. And there's this verse here in verse 25 that says, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way of death." There's a way that seems right, not a way that seems wrong, but a way that seems right. We know some people that are living in ways that if you ask them, they'll say, "I know I need to change this." They know it's wrong, but sometimes they're just doing it anyway. They just can't seem to change or stop. But there's a way. He said, there is a way. The Bible said, there is a way which seems right to a man, but the end is death. Through all of mankind, there is a way that seems right. Well, it's not hard to figure out what that way is, because all we have to do is look at the book of Genesis and look at our beginnings as the race of man. And we see that we ate of this tree of knowledge of good and evil. And why did we do that? Because it seemed good. It seemed right to us.
But it led to death.
But it led to death. And we know that eating of that tree of knowledge of good and evil is what brought all the corruption and the destruction, the death, into earthly existence. And so that being the problem of the whole thing, that being the beginning of sorrows, if you will, then let's look at what really Jesus did in this restoration. You know, we say that he came to deliver us from our sin, and the Bible uses that a lot. But tracking it down, the Bible also says in Romans 5:14 that where there is no law, there is no transgression. And we know that the law, the Old Testament law, was simply an amplification, really, of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What it did was it amplified good and evil and pointed at it. And what it ended up doing was condemning us because the evil got magnified. Because the tree of knowledge of good and evil, what it promises us, it doesn't deliver, but what it promises us, and the reason that we were so tempted by that tree in the garden was that it promised us that we would be like gods, knowing good and evil, that we would have the ability and the capacity to discern and to know knowledge and to judge what is good and what is evil. And we thought and still think all over the world today that for us to know what is good and what is evil, and all we have to do then, if we can clearly know those things, is we just cleave to the good, just do good, and depart from the evil. And that's all we have to do. So what we did was we went after that knowledge, because then we could be like God. All we have to do is know what was good, and we'll just do it. And know what's evil, and just don't do that. It's as simple as that. And that's what it promised us, but it didn't work out that way, did it? In fact, God said it wouldn't. He says, it's going to kill you. He said, don't eat of that tree. He says, it will kill you. It might be tempting, it looks good, but it will kill you. And so we partook of that tree thinking that it would make us better, thinking that us having this knowledge of what's good and what's evil would do it. Now let's look at this and let's remember something. God didn't want us to have that knowledge. He wanted us to have life. And what we see before we ate of that tree was, I always point out how we were naked and not ashamed. Why? Because it wasn't about us. We didn't have a judgment of good or evil upon our condition, because it didn't matter. It was in Him that we lived and moved and have our being. He was our source. He was our life.
But we didn't have the capacity to judge at that point.
No, because we didn't know. We didn't have the knowledge.
So we were just blissfully happy and enjoying and not even really thinking about that.
No, we were just living. But this temptation to have the knowledge of good and evil was a big thing. It was so big. That is the one thing that brought about the fall of all of us. Now, I like these things that the New Testament says, like when John was announcing the coming of the Messiah, he says, now the axe is laid to the root of the tree.
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist said that. And it would refer ultimately back to that tree of knowledge. That thing that caused all the death and destruction and corruption, that thing was going to be cut down. And now Jesus would be able to give us life and life more abundantly. Jesus, remember, he looked at a fig tree. He said, no man will eat fruit of you anymore hereafter. I believe it's a reference to that tree, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Many people, people have different theories about it. I tend to be one who leans towards it was more a fig tree, maybe not literally, but symbolically. The Bible would speak of a fig tree. In fact, it was fig leaves that they put on, thinking that would cover them, would cover their mistakes. And we think, when we're religious or philosophical or smart, or we think we're wise, we think that we can cover ourselves with good. We think we can cover ourselves with knowledge, with knowledge, and this is what we went after, and that was going to take away our shame, but it didn't. Even though we were naked, we covered ourselves, but we still were ashamed.
We hid. Adam and Eve hid.
Yeah, because covering ourselves with the fig leaves weren't enough, so we went and hid among the trees. And we still were afraid, because we still didn't feel right, because nothing we do from that tree of knowledge of good and evil is ever going to take away the shame or the fear of mankind. It doesn't do it, and it never had for thousands of years, and all it did was brought corruption and destruction, and the way of that thing was death, even though it seems right. Now, here's where I want to bring this thing. This is the same thing. That was the big temptation to us. That was the temptation that caused what we call the fall of man. That temptation of that tree is still, I believe, the strongest temptation of mankind and even Christians.
Our biggest downfall.
It is our biggest downfall, because not only is it the strongest temptation, but it's the one that people, including Christians, who I'm mostly talking to tonight, fall for probably on a daily basis. But the vast majority probably fall for the temptation to partake of that tree of knowledge of good and evil on a daily basis. We see it all the time, don't we? And these are good people that love the Lord, but many don't realize what they're doing. They all want to discuss what's right and what's wrong. What about the social issues of the day? Where do you side, Rick? They always want to. Any of you watching this, do you ever notice that people are always demanding that you take a side on something? What do you say about this issue that's going on in the country today? And if it has anything to do with morality or hints of it, it's very rarely good enough to someone for you not to take a stand on one side or the other, because we want a judgment on everything. This is those of us who are eating of that tree. We are tempted to judge everything according to good or evil, and put that upon it. we judged ourselves according to that. The interesting thing, in the story, we've got just Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. We don't have like a lot of other people that are being mentioned. We've got Adam and Eve eating of that tree, and we take upon ourselves this ability to judge now. And the problem with that, with Adam and Eve, was that there weren't, if there were lots of other people around, they would have just started pointing their finger saying good, evil, good, evil, good, evil, but we don't see them with lots of people around them. It was just them. So all they could do was look at themselves, and they judged it. And they judged themselves as evil, or they judged themselves not worthy. They judged themselves as something being wrong with them, and that they needed to cover themselves, and they were ashamed of themselves for some reason. It's very interesting to me that they were created in a way and living in a way that made them ashamed only when they knew the knowledge of good and evil. And if they had never had that knowledge, they would have never been ashamed and would not have known the corruption and destruction of death. So when we think about the tree, it wasn't just the act of disobedience, it's what that tree really meant. The ability to discern or judge good and evil.
Yeah, because they didn't just hide from God because they were ashamed that they did the wrong thing.
It doesn't say that.
It says they hid from God because
they were naked.
And it was a judgment on themselves.
Mm-hmm. And that's why that tree only brought condemnation. And then later on, when God brought the law, which was simply an amplification of that knowledge. That's all it was. It brought a big amplification of that knowledge. It really condemns, and it really pointed out sin, but it never empowered for life. In fact, the Bible says that it kills. It's called the ministry of death. That tree is the ministry of death. Now, today, here's what people are doing, is that we're unknowingly eating of that tree. They're falling for the temptation of that fruit of that tree. We just have to call something good or evil. Everything has to fall on one side or the other. We sit around as Christians and we discuss, well, what about this? What about smoking? What about drinking? What about cussing? What about, what about the homosexual issue? What about abortion? What about this and that and the other? And everything has to fall good and evil. And if you don't agree that it's good with people or agree that it's evil with people, then you have a debate going on. Because we have to decide whether things or people are good or evil. Mm-hmm. And I refer to your blog, and this is what, you brought out how in so many of these instances that Jesus, take Zacchaeus, for example. He goes to his house. The Pharisees are following him around, watching to see if he's going to do something wrong. They're going to see what he's going to do there, because they're thinking Jesus is going to do one of two things, because there's only two things you can do. You will either condemn Zacchaeus for being a thief,
judge as evil,
or you will condone it,
judge as good,
mm-hmm, and make it look like thievery is good. Mm-hmm. And when we read the story, we don't see Jesus condemning or condoning thievery. Nowhere does he say, that thievery is really awesome, keep doing that, Zacchaeus. Mm-hmm. Don't feel bad about it, just do it. He didn't say that either. He didn't have to do either one. What did he do? He did what we've been calling the third option. He did what he saw the Father do. He brought forth the heart and the character and nature of heaven, of God himself, and he loved the man as a person without bringing any condemning or condoning.
He brought life.
He brought life, and that's what he came to do, right?
Whenever he would heal or whenever he would forgive or set free, that's bringing life. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Pharisees, over and over again, were trying to get him to judge for good or for evil, mm-hmm, and he wouldn't do it. In fact, he said, I did not come to condemn. And everybody that was looking for him, they thought that there was going to be some condemning going on, because there's lots of evil that we can see. And all religions do it. All philosophies do it, I think. And people do it. And Christians, because I think we've been misled on some things, or at least have not understood some things, we think that has a place in our lives. Now, what I want to get to, here's why I really want the Spirit to help us with this, is because the alternative to that is life. The alternative to that is life in the Spirit. The alternative to that is living a life where you can be naked and not ashamed, and not be in danger, and not need
condemnation or condoning. You don't need either one. What you need is life. What you need is unconditional love from the Father, and that's what does that. You remember, in fact, you posted something about it tonight. But the story about that you share sometimes where you ask me if there's something that you could do
better
or
to
should
be a good wife.
Yeah, and my answer to you basically was, just keep breathing. Be who you are, because I love you I love all of you, flaws, faults, all of it together, because it's who you are. And it wasn't a separation of saying, well, Judy, this is good and this is bad, so do more of the good and try to do less of the bad. There wasn't any of that. There's the way you say it is, there's something about unconditional love that empowers and causes you to bloom and blossom, and it actually makes you better. You respond to that love and you grow in that love, and you cannot help but change, right? You can't help it. And this is how God works. See, in Christianity, we think that He uses the tree of knowledge of good and evil to change us. If you really want to change, if you really want to grow and become better, then I would suggest the first thing you settle in your mind is that God is not trying to change you. The pause is on purpose. Let that sink in. God, His agenda, His main agenda is not to try to change you. His agenda is to love you so that you and Him can be together. That was the whole purpose of Jesus coming. So that He said, so that where I am, you can be too. That we can be together, that we can be one. That's His main agenda. He just wants to be one, without any other thing, without any other prerequisites, without any cleaning up or anything. He just came to be one with us just as we are. The cool, awesome thing about it is that love and that union changes us in the most powerful, magnificent way, because when we have been filled with the love of God, we become like that. We get better. We love. And love fulfills all the law based on good and evil. And love is the highest moral code that there is. Someone was mentioning the other night and said, yeah, but it's still, I know we've got to live right. Somebody said, we still have to try to do what God wants us to do, still have to try to live good and be a good person, right? And see, there's a temptation to agree with that because it all sounds right, and it is right on the surface, but the answer that I gave came like this. I said, the truth is, I never think about it anymore. I never think about trying to live right. I never think about trying to do what God would have us to do. There's a place of living loved and knowing God that way, because He digs you. He loves you so much that you feel so close to Him, and you know Him in that way that you are simply reflecting what's happening to you. You're loving, you're giving, you're doing all those things, and you're not even thinking about it. You're just breathing. In Him we live and move and have our being. We're just living. And we're just being ourselves in Him, but because we're in this relationship with Him, it makes us so much better. You know what I'm talking about? Automatically. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, it makes us try to do good. We have to remember which things are right. We have to remember which things are evil. We have to always, stay on the correct side of those judgments there. But Jesus came to give us something that is outside of that knowledge of good and evil. He came to give us life in God. Are there any comments? I want to know how this is coming and how, if I'm bringing it clear so far, or any questions?
No, not so far.
Okay. I'm just hearing crickets now. No, just kidding. Let me read some more here in Proverbs 16, verse 27. It says, an ungodly man digs up evil. Well, let's talk about that preacher that got into sin. What do you say? I mean, I just think that's not right. What do you think? I think he should he should get right back in the pulpit. No, I think that he should do a year of restoration first. Well, I think that he should submit to this and that, and we have all those things. And however, whatever would be the best thing for the person, there's people have these. They're more than opinions. They're judgments. They're judgments usually on the process of somebody. And people are always, what about this? What about that? And we sit around and we just eat of that tree and eat of that tree. Jesus, so what do you think about Zacchaeus? What do you think about this man that's a thief here? So what would you do? Would you just go into his house and eat with him and not say anything? Or would you tell him what's what? Jesus, like you point out, always seemed to do the third option, which was just bring love and life to him. And that love and life, what we see over and over and over in his dealings with the people, is it would touch the heart in a way that the knowledge of good and evil could not. Because all it would do is just heap up more of what was already there. All the condemnation, all the law, and the knowledge of good and evil, he was under that already. Zacchaeus was already a thief under a system based on the knowledge of good and evil, a religious system. And all their condemning, he knew that he was wrong. He knew that they condemned what he was doing. He knew that he was not right in their sight and in the sight of their God as they projected him. But none of that pressure, none of that knowledge of good and evil brought life to him where it transformed him and caused him to change and get better. In fact, he just kept stealing. But life came, Jesus came, and the one who just wanted to be with him, just come on, I want to eat at your house. I don't know what Zacchaeus was thinking, but I'm wondering if he was scared a little bit, like, oh man, this prophet's really going to let me have it, or I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he already knew that Jesus was better than him. I don't know, but it'd have been. If it would have been me and that doing those things, I would have been like, oh boy, he's going to, what's he going to do? Pronounce judgment on me or what? But he comes to him and he doesn't do anything except want to be with him. Zacchaeus, I want to be with you. I'm a thief. Nobody wants to be with me, especially somebody in the name of God. Mm-hmm. I want to be with you. He was stealing from people. Religious and non-religious didn't want to be with him. He's a thief. Jesus says, I want to be with you. Mm-hmm. I want to eat with you tonight. Mm-hmm. You're going to be, we're going to have a special night, just me and you. We're going to sit at your house and we're going to fellowship. Mm-hmm. Zacchaeus tastes of some fellowship with this Jesus. Life, who is life. And life did what the tree of knowledge of good and evil couldn't do. I really believe this revival of grace, of the grace revelation that is happening around the world. I'm so excited because it's opening us up to life. Finally, it's taken away all the reasons that we cannot be united and enjoy the union of life with Him. Mm-hmm. And wherever there's that knowledge of good and evil, there will always be some shame and some attempt at trying to be better and trying to look better. Control. There will always be fear, which is there will be control always with fear. They were ashamed and afraid. And whenever you're afraid, that's a good point, is that you're always going to you'll try to control you for one thing, and you're just going to keep on getting oppressed, and you're going to have stress, and you're going to have frustration. You're going to always feel like you're incomplete in Him, and you're going to try to control things, because you're afraid, because you don't feel complete. The tree of knowledge of good and evil never gives you that sense of completion. The work of righteousness that Jesus brings, the work of righteousness will be peace. And the effect of righteousness will be confidence and assurance, or quietness and assurance, forever or continually. And not only that, but when you're afraid, when you're ashamed, and when you're afraid, and you're controlling, you'll try to control other people. Mm-hmm. You've pointed out how Jesus, he'd go to some place and he healed that man at Gadara, and the rest of the people didn't want him around. Well, so he just blessed the one there, that did receive from him, and the other ones, he just said, okay, well, stay there, stay there with your pigs. But he didn't force himself on them. He didn't try to control. It's amazing that people try to put that on God. They think God's trying to control. They think that God is doing all these horrible things, trying to control the situation because there's just too much evil going on, and He's doing all these things. And the truth is, they don't even know how He is. Jesus showed us how the Father is. And He's good, and He's gentle, and He's kind, and He's wonderful, and He's loving, and He's altogether lovely. And even though people can say that He's all those things, they really don't feel or live like He is those things to them, because they don't know what to do with this tree of knowledge of good and evil. What about what's right and what's wrong? Cut the thing off at the roots. Cut that thing in your life off with an axe, and you never have to eat fruit of that tree again. We can live in life. And don't be afraid of love. Don't be afraid of the God kind of love, because that's powerful. The God kind of love will change planet Earth. The God kind of love can touch any heart, and it can change any heart. It can change a thief like Zacchaeus. It can change a prostitute who was rubbing Jesus' feet. And there again, they were waiting for Him to either condemn her. They're thinking, well, He must not be a prophet, because a prophet wouldn't let a woman like this touch him. Jesus said, I want to be with you. Everybody knew what she'd done. Everybody knew her lifestyle. And Jesus comes with the agenda of the Father. I'm just doing what I see my Father do. I'm sent to do Thy will, O Father. And He's saying, and over and over again, I just want to be with you. Isn't He wonderful?
He is. And you know, it's interesting because of all the opportunities, all the offers of life He gave to so many people, the Pharisees' hearts really never softened. You know, I think there is something to free will that He respected. There were people that misunderstood. There were people who were so overly tempted by the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I think that's what the Pharisees were, stuck in that temptation that they couldn't see life.
That tree of knowledge of good and evil doesn't bring life. It brings corruption. You mentioned control a moment ago. So many Christians are up in arms, are in turmoil right now about some things going on in this country.
Like gun control.
Like gun control, abortion, homosexuality, all these different issues that are going on. They're trying to control the whole thing honestly, I believe, out of carnal weaponry rather than the one weapon that can actually work. The one weapon that never fails. Love never fails. People are, in Christianity, they have problems. They still struggle with legalism, or they still struggle with this knowledge of good and evil, because they see people doing things that are obviously not biblical. Evil. We would classify them as evil. And they see those things, and they think that the only way to win over that is to amplify the knowledge of good and evil in that situation. And they think that if we have that knowledge to become bigger and brighter and more amplified, then people will get better, people will change. But it never worked from the very beginning. And God didn't want us to have that. We wanted it.
It's a really good point, is He never wanted us to have that.
No, we wanted it. It was too He doesn't want us to have it now. But too many times, so many of us were too tempted. We're too tempted. And we just have to answer, because it makes us look smart. It's a tree, it's a fruit that's desired to make one wise.
It seems right.
It's a way that seems right. And we don't want to just sit around and seem ambivalent,
and that frustrates everybody, because they want you on one side or the other.
And they have to know. They have to know. There are people that they love my teaching. They receive from it. They get blessed by it. But then behind the scenes, they're like, well, you tell me what you believe about this. I never preach about that. Yeah, but I want to know what you believe, because I suspect maybe you might believe differently. What does it matter?
Because then we don't want to hear anything from you anymore, right?
Right. If they can find something, that they don't like, and then it throws them off. Then they can't receive. Then let me tell you something that happened to me many years ago. This was back in the 90s, and at that time I felt like I was developing this real gift of discernment. I felt like I could just see motives and things in people. I called it a prophetic gift. Now, when I look back on it, I think it's more pathetic than prophetic. But it seemed like I seemed like I could see into the hearts of people, and I could see motives, and I could see a lot of things that I once wasn't quite as aware of. And I remember being in a meeting, and I was listening to a lady minister, and she probably did a good job, but I'm sitting there and I'm judging her because I see selfish ambition in her. I see, I just see some things that bother me about her. And I even tried to talk to her afterwards, and it was just so awkward because I couldn't connect with her because I had put this wall up because I had seen some things about her and I didn't like her. And when I look back on it, it wasn't a real gift, or even if it was, it wouldn't matter. But I went back to my hotel room and I said, Father, I don't want to see anything about anybody anymore. I don't want to know if anybody is doing anything wrong at all. And the Lord said, son, you're going to grow to the place to where you can see anything and it won't bother you. It won't affect your soul in a bad way. You see, I believe the Father is like that. It's not that the Father is blind. He knows who we are, but He loves us. He's love. And so love can handle anything. Love beareth all things. And I can honestly say that has happened in my life. I have grown spiritually to where now I can see all kinds of things, and somehow it doesn't bother me like it bothers a lot of people. And I just have this peace. There's a lot of things that in our nation and in the world, there's a lot of things that obviously could be a lot better and should be a lot better. But I cannot help but have this peace in my heart. Something that comes from being linked with God and operating in that realm of life and not being frustrated and fearful by the knowledge of good and evil, because that knowledge brings those things. It brings fear. It brings stress. It brings frustration. It says here, an ungodly man digs up evil. His lips are like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife and separates the best of friends. A violent man entices his neighbor and leads him in a way that is not good. So we have all these things going on, and we're digging up evil, talking about what's good and what's evil, and we're going in a way that doesn't lead to life.
Yeah.
There is a way that is separate from this tree of knowledge of good and evil. So anyway, I've noticed over the years that I grew to the place, and what it is when I saw Amazing Grace, when I saw through that revelation of grace how much God really loved me, how limitless and how unconditionally He loved me, it did something. It transformed me. And it brought me to a place of life to where I have such peace in all kinds of situations. Some situations are not positive that we find ourselves in. But why do I have such peace in the middle of it? Because I'm not looking for, well, did I do something good? Did I do something wrong? People are always, remember when Jesus came up and He healed a blind man in John chapter 9. What's the first question? The disciples are, well, who sinned? Somebody must have sinned horribly for this to happen. I mean, he was born blind. Who sinned? Did he sin to become blind, or did his parents sin that he was born blind? Yeah. And Jesus is like, it's not about that.
Yeah.
Because the tree of knowledge of good and evil says that if you'll just cleave to the good, then you'll be good, and good things, it'll go good with you. Yeah. And if you'll cleave to the evil, then you'll be evil, and evil things will happen. And so they're thinking along those lines. The natural man thinks that because the tree of knowledge of good and evil operates in this natural man's carnal realm. But life is in the spirit, and life is the mind of Christ. And when we see things with the mind of Christ, we're not troubled by evil. We're not moved at bad tidings, because we operate in a different realm and we see with a different set of eyes. We see with the eyes that we were looking at before we ate that knowledge of good and evil. When we ate of that fruit, our natural carnal eyes opened up, where we could just judge. And Doesn't the knowledge of good and evil make perfect sense to a natural person?
It's all you have.
That's
really.
why all religions are based on it.
Yeah.
That's all you have, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's all you have to go by. So why almost all religion and philosophy is based upon the knowledge of good and evil, the yin and the yang, the eye for the eye. You've got all of that. And it's all about the good and the evil, the positive, the negative, and all that. There is something else that goes beyond natural man's knowledge. Ephesians says it's the love of Christ that passes all knowledge. All knowledge. And when you know that, he says, then you can be filled with all the fullness of God. In him is life. He loves you unconditionally, without any boundaries, without any limitations. Unlimited, unconditional love. God loves you, and it's that love is what changes you into someone who's not only partaking of life, but you're exuding life and spreading life. And it's the greatest power that there's ever been. God is love. Do we have any input?
Yeah, he was saying a while ago, back about the same time you said it, reminds me of when Jesus was in the Pharisee's house and the woman came in and wept on Jesus' feet. And the Pharisee says, if he knew what kind of woman this was, and Jesus says, your sins are forgiven.
Your sins are forgiven. And how can he do that? He's not. We want to understand. The Bible said in Isaiah, it prophesied of the coming of the Messiah, and it says he would not judge with the sight of his eyes. Mm-hmm. You see, Adam and Eve, their eyes were open. Humanity, our eyes were opened to the knowledge of good and evil. Are some things good? Are some things evil? Yeah, but God didn't want us to live by the knowledge of those things. Didn't want the knowledge of what's good and what's evil to be the ruling factor in our lives.
So he gave us an escape route.
And the Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. And Jesus was going to bring us back home. Mm-hmm. He was going to bring mankind into that oneness with God again. And he said, it will come to pass that whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Saved from what? From all the destruction and corruption that came in. And let's don't forget, it originally came in with that tree. Mm-hmm. That tree caused all of our problem. Let's don't eat of that tree anymore. Because that's the problem. That tree, it looks good, mm-hmm. but it's our problem.
Yeah. So what you see happening a lot on social media is one side takes the left and one side takes the right. And they hate each other for where they're at. And all it does is it causes people to dig into their own arguments to the point where both sides realize that people are just taking the stands just to support their side. They're not even really thinking about the arguments anymore. But what happens, what you see in it from just reading, from just looking, is death. You see a stalemate.
It's this horrible, yucky feeling of death.
And there's no solving when you're in that situation. In fact, it's just really a civil war. What I think is good
death on
and
death.
What you think is evil. However, what's really neat to me, or what I think was so brilliant about Jesus, is that he said, I'm going to give you a way over this. So you don't get caught in this back and forth, which is what the Pharisees pretty much offered. And he's saying, look, I'm showing you, watch this. I'm going to give you another way. It's the kingdom of God way. It's another way. And some people didn't get it. But the people who did, it changed their lives.
Yeah.
They were healed. They were set free. They were given us, a new lease on life. And it was good. It was life-giving. And it was enough to change the world, It wasn't just, here and there. It was enough to absolutely
change the world, and has been changing it since. And people have been finding that life.
We just don't want to go back into operating like the world in the knowledge of good and evil, because there's no victory there. There's no life there. There's no winning
and
there.
Christians, and Christians, there are very many sincere and hungry Christians that really, they want God. They want the fullness of God.
Yeah.
They want a life complete in Him. They want to walk in pure faith, and grace, pleasing, be well-pleasing to God and all that. And they're sincere about that. but the way that so many of them are doing it looks like the right way to get there.
And
It's not. It's not. And that's why you if you're doing that, you still feel incomplete. You still have issues. You still feel like you're on a journey.
Like you still feel like you want to
still get
hurt
angry.
somebody for believing like the world believes.
Yeah, and it bothers you so bad.
That's kind of a clue
that's not life.
Yeah, you're probably not in the best.
Yeah, but you don't have to be. There's here it is. There's the alternative now. Now I came to give you life. And so really, if we can see this tonight and recognize that, what he came to give us was not an amplification of knowing good and evil. Jesus did not come to give us more power just to choose good and stay away from evil. He didn't come just to give us power to keep the 10 Commandments, which was the tree of knowledge of good and evil amplified. Is all it was. He didn't give us power to partake of that tree. He delivered us from that tree. He says there's a new and living way, or a new way of life. Walk in that. Do we trust it? Do we see it? And can we embrace it? Or at least, at the very least, maybe some of you watching this live or on video will look at it. Maybe you'll do like Moses and just kind of like, I'm going to look at this thing. This thing that's otherworldly. This thing that's different from anything else I've seen in all my 80 years. This sure is a new thing. But I'm going to turn and look at it and see what this is. And when he did, God said, now you're on holy ground.
That's good. I'll try to look at it. I had 2 thoughts about Adam and Eve. One was, they didn't really have anyone to judge, so the first judgment was on themselves. I'm naked. But then remember, Adam said, well, the woman you gave me made me do it. It was sort of like a judgment on God and on the woman.
She did worse than me.
And then later, Cain and Abel, that tree of knowledge of good and evil, that judgment, was responsible for the first murder.
Yeah. Why? Because Cain's deeds were evil and his were good, and so that always comes down to everything. They, what you pointed out about Adam. He passed the buck because people always, something else is always their problem. There's always their problem. There's too much sin. It's society. It's something. There's always reasons for falling short. Well, the woman you gave me. It's funny to me because to me it sounded like he's actually blaming God. He didn't just say the woman did it. He said the woman you gave me. If you hadn't given me this woman, then none of this would have happened. You gave me the woman ate the tree, she gave me the fruit, I ate it, so it gets traced back to you,
Why do you ever feel like that about me? Like, God, the woman you gave me.
Every single day I go, good job, thank you, thank you. It's a wonderful thing that God did. We're going to be celebrating our 2 years now, all month. But in 1 week we have our anniversary. God's done a wonderful thing. People, God is good. God is absolutely good. And there is a way of life. There is a way to live this thing. There is a way of goodness. There is a way of blessing. There is a way of sweetness in this existence and power to live this life. And it's not the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not pointing the finger at what's good and what's evil. It's enjoying the life of God. And that's where you see the empowerment for goodness and sweetness and power to take over your life. And you walk with this power in your life. You walk with this joy in your life. Peace and love. And I'm telling you, that is a heavenly existence. That's where it's at. And that tree of knowledge of good and evil, it will just bring you more turmoil. No matter how much good you think you're doing, you're never going to do enough. And you're never going to have real peace from eating with that. In fact, if you eat a lot of it, you're probably going to be in fights all the time. That's not the way of salvation. And the wrath of man doesn't work the righteousness of God.
That's true.
And the reason that we have the wrath of man in a religious setting is because we see evil. We have a knowledge of evil. We don't like it. We get angry at it.
Yeah.
We get angry and we get indignant at it, and we try to battle it in a way that promises us that this is how you get rid of it, but it seems right. But the end of it is destruction. It doesn't work. There's a way that hasn't been tried by and large. Really, because I mean, Jesus showed us that. Jesus shows that, and really, He's revealing that to so many of us. But the tree of knowledge, the good and evil, has still been planted firmly in Christianity's life.
Yeah.
But notice at the end of the book, in Revelation 22, He describes paradise again, and there's a tree of life in the midst of it. And there's no tree of knowledge of good and evil there. There is no tree of knowledge here. And when I look at my garden, in my existence, for the kingdom that's within me, it's hard for me to find that tree now.
Yeah.
It's hard to find that tree. And when you're not partaking of that tree, then you can partake of that tree of life. And that's a place where you're not. When you're partaking of that, you lose the struggle and the striving. You come into a flow of power and life. And you're not trying to overcome things all the time. You've overcome because of Him.
That's good.
And you're living that, and you know that. It's a wonderful life. All right, let's see if there's any other. We'll take any other comments or questions on this. Hope it's a blessing to you. Jesus brought us so much. To me, it's so clear to see that He brought us a complete restoration. He brought us a complete life, and life more abundantly. And it's found in Him. He says, take my yoke upon you. Learn of me. I'm different. He says, I'm humble. I'm meek and lowly in heart. He didn't come around pointing out, who was doing good, who was doing evil. The only confrontations that He really had were people that were pointing out the good and evil.
Yeah.
And when they would ask Him about it, He would usually just bring it back around to the heart, the heart change. And that heart change always can only truly happen when it's touched by the heart of the Father. Okay.
Winter Wellflower, she said, I just want to take a second and thank you guys for doing this. You have been and are continuing to open my eyes.
Oh.
And she says, wow, that makes so much sense.
Thank you. I'm so glad it does. That's what sometimes I'm afraid that I'm not making enough sense, but
You make sense.
I want it to be. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, God bless you guys. Enjoy your Christianity. Enjoy your God. Enjoy your life. Every day is a gift. And Jesus came that you would have this life and have it more abundantly. And it's found in the love, the power, the peace, and the joy of Him, and not that other thing. Amen. Amen. Okay, we're going to sign off now. And I'm going to hit the record button so we're not recording anymore. And for those of you watching this on the recorded version, thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time.